Welcome to MTC Studios. I'm Dennis Schmulin. I'm the Chief Health Strategy Officer for the U.S. Health and Life Sciences at Microsoft. And I have here with me today Dave Hennessy, the VP of Information Technology at Metrocare Services. And I also have Steve Cracknell, the CIO and President of U.S. Medical IT. And the show today is Metrocare Extends Access with Telebehavioral Health. So to get started, could each of you tell me your company, describe your company, the role you serve, and the service area that your company covers.
Thanks.
Let's start with you, Dave.
Thank you. I'm Dave Hennessy. I'm the VP of IT for Metrocare Services. We are a behavioral healthcare provider based in Dallas, Texas. We have 13 locations around Dallas County. A variety of different programs in mental health and intellectual developmental disability programs, homeless services, social services. We have 1,300 employees. Those employees are spread, as I said, throughout the 12 different locations throughout Dallas County, and we've been around for almost 50 years in business.
Great. And how many patients do you serve?
A unique patient count yearly on average around 52,000 within the Dallas area.
Steve, how about you?
Yeah, so U.S. Medical IT, we founded U.S. Medical IT back in 2010 with a specific goal of helping healthcare organizations adopt technology. So we really specialize in the Microsoft world. We're a gold competency Microsoft partner, and we help healthcare organizations move to the cloud. So we'll do Office 365, we do Azure and Enterprise Mobility Suite, and we're getting deeper and deeper into Power BI as well. That's our space.
Excellent. Okay. Dave, could you kind of start by telling us your journey to telebehavioral health? It usually doesn't start with telebehavioral health, but how did you get started on this journey? Because many primary care offices are not using telehealth or telebehavioral health today.
All right. So I joined Metrocare Services around 3 years ago as the director of IT. When I joined the company, we were pretty set in our ways in terms of technology. We had in-house servers, in-house exchange boxes, no instant messaging platform. The idea of the cloud literally seemed in the clouds. It was a long way from where the company was comfortable going to. So my attitude, my thought process, like Bob, working in IT for a really long time, is that people need to be able to do their jobs while working securely, but extending their ability to be able to be more productive, be more resourceful. So I had worked with Office 365 previously, because I'd worked in clinical trials for quite a long time before I came to Metrocare. BPOS all the way to Office 365. I was very comfortable with Microsoft's cloud offerings. But I needed a provider or a partner in Texas. I had just moved to Texas, didn't know anybody in Texas, that could help me go through the minefield of healthcare and healthcare regulation, especially in Texas, which is pretty heavily regulated and changing regulations. So I did a search, came up with two companies, reached out to one of them, and actually, funnily enough, during the process of us reaching out to each other, our encryption product that we had at the time failed miserably. We couldn't even talk to each other properly, which gave him the idea they definitely need to do something about their encryption. So we met. He immediately, impressed me to the fact that I was going to get a real partner out of this, somebody who was engaged in seeing our company be successful and kind of understand the regulation world within Texas the way that he did. And that was how we came to actually start working together, which is approaching 3 years now. So yeah, that's how it all started.
Great. Well, on the topic of digital transformation, a big topic today, what would your CEO say the biggest opportunities are in Metrocare around digital transformation?
One of the things that's actually allowed Metrocare IT to be as successful as they have been is because of our visionary CEO. He understands the importance of technology. He understands how important it is for the future of our employees, but more importantly, the well-being of our patients. Through the progress that we've made with our technology, we've seen the level of care increase, to our patients. Our CEO has been an active user of all of the technologies that we've actually employed. I think that you have to have that. You know, if you're going to bring about new technologies, and we certainly did, we turned it upside down. You need your leader to be, you know, leading the way for you, waving the flag, and he most certainly did do that.
Great. You had mentioned, Dave, too, to me that online presence and instant messaging was kind of like I think you even said almost revolutionary.
Yeah.
Could you describe what that was like?
At first, people thought that why would I ever need this? And I had seen this happen before when I had employed the use of Office 365. People said, why would I ever need it? And it became the most used tool. So at first, it was a little strange for people to get used to this idea of like, well, I can do, you know, chat with people. You know, they thought that was weird. That was something you do in your own life outside of work.
Right.
You don't do that at work. But once it actually started to take off, people now use it for everything. It's much more than chat. It's sharing files. They're presenting their screens. They're doing their own video conferencing. They're not having to travel from location to location to attend to meetings, which they used to have to do all the time. So we gave them time back. And that was the one thing that they actually have taken from this, is that they got time back in their day. Time is a commodity that you can't make. Someone has to give it to you. And so we did do that through the use of IM.
And would you say there's any impact on direct impact on patient care and patient care experience and throughput and so forth? Can you tell me that angle?
Quicker communication amongst the staff, like so that, you know, throughout the patient journey, throughout the patient encounter, the check-in process, the financial assessment, the journey throughout the office, being able to inform the next person along the cycle. Your patient is ready, on his way down, prepare yourself, get ready. Those kind of things like are so much faster than walking to tell somebody something or picking up the phone. You know, it's a constant. You are always engaged.
Yeah. I have to say, Metrocare, we've seen this happen in other organizations as well. Nobody has ever called us and said, we need an instant messaging solution, get over here right away.
Right.
It's usually, we've got an aging Exchange server, it's about to fall down, help us get our email off of our old server. But I have to say, consistently, Skype for Business is almost like a contagion. Once it gets planted in there, it spreads like wildfire throughout the whole organization, and it's probably it is the game changer of the suite of Office 365, because all the other tools, they've already had a place to store their files and a way to send emails. This is a net new tool that really changes the dynamic and how people communicate with each other, and it's been phenomenal. And I think Metrocare is the prime example of being able to take that foundation and extend it into the clinical purposes of telemedicine, telehealth.
Right. A lot of customers I meet think have this mindset that any conversation should occur within the electronic health record, and they don't think about process flow and calls coming in and financial questions and so forth, and finding resources while the patient's still there, and the benefits in non-clinical processes as well.
Right. Well, you think the Skype for Business can be a platform. You have that same conversation. You still store the data in the EMR. You can even use desktop sharing and use that as your existing repository. Right. It doesn't need to replace an EMR. It's just simply a tool to help people that are at distance.
Yeah, and we've been about like trying to improve communication, and all companies say that we have to improve communication. I mean, this is a tool that just does it for you. As soon as people adopt it and they get used to it, it's a major add-on to the tool set that we've already given them. And you know, as Stephen says, it's the key one. It's invaluable to them.
Yeah. Did I correctly hear you say that you have 1,300 employees and all of them are using Office 365?
Yes.
So could you tell me what are the success factors that enabled you to drive that kind of adoption and usage to such a high level?
Well, we gave it to all of them right off the bat. There was everybody got it. We did not. We did a very small pilot program trial with about 30 users before our launch date, and our launch took place over a weekend in October. And 2 weeks later, we had 1,300 people. Not at the time 1,300, maybe 1,200 people using Office 365. using Outlook, using Link at the time, starting to use SharePoint, getting used to the idea of OneDrive. I mean, we gave them a lot, and it seems like, what, all at once? Yes. Because it's all tied in together, and that's the beauty of it. Once you start using one and you get comfortable with one, it makes it so much easier to get comfortable to the next thing. So, yeah, we did an immediate adoption.
So you kind of started with email and instant messaging and presence. What came next?
So SharePoint, we started on the SharePoint project after that.
Yeah.
We had used a very old intranet that was reasonably popular, but for the most part, the word from the users was, I don't like it, I don't know how to use it, I can't find anything. So with US Medical's help, we started building our SharePoint platform. I've been a major fan of SharePoint for years. I love it. It just keeps getting better. But we wanted to make our SharePoint look cool. So we worked with US Medical to develop the Metro interface at the time, which was the Windows 8 Metro interface that just came out. We wanted to make it look familiar. So yes, we have a Metro interface still. And it is the second heaviest used application within Metrocare, behind our electronic health record application. We get 600 unique visits to our SharePoint site every day.
Phenomenal.
That's all it has half the company.
What about audio conferencing, web
Yes.
conferencing, and video conferencing? How soon did those begin being used?
The IT department started using them immediately because we wanted to try to breathe the adoption rate, or at least increase it as much as we could. I was thinking it was about 6 months before we were getting orders for video cameras constantly. We were out there.
Why?
Because people were always having to travel, and they were always having to get in their cars to go for meetings. And once they knew that that there was this ability for them now to be able to engage in video conferencing instead of getting in their car, everybody wanted it. They had the software. They knew how to use Link or Skype. Just needed to add in a camera to them, and then all of a sudden, they were engaged in video meetings. And our CEO started to record some of his meetings, or his presentations to the whole company, and we used Office 365 videos to be able to place his video for people who hadn't been able to attend the town hall meeting. So again, with him using the technology, it helped us sell it.
So it sounds like you kind of set the stage for telemedicine or telebehavioral health. Was that the next logical step?
So yes, I mean our chief medical officer came to our CIO and myself at the time and said, we want to use telemedicine. And we smiled and we thought, okay, we already have the basis there. We have a Microsoft partner that we can work with that's going to help us do this, but we knew what we had. So Stephen's team built out these amazing carts that we placed into 2 of our locations. Again, using Link, which everybody already knew how to do. And so all they needed to do was just get used to the actual room, and we needed to keep it to HIPAA regulations, so the room was set and secure the way that it was supposed to be. The cart was wheeled in, plugged in, they logged in and used our electronic health record application for notes and charting and all of the things that they normally do, but used Link, and that was where it was born from. So we leveraged our technology that we'd already spent money on, and we just added in some hardware.
Yeah.
And again, minimal learning curve.
Okay. And could anybody use or turn these machines on, or these?
No. I mean, they could, but as I said, they were locked and secure. We had very detailed instructions so that, yes, anybody whose job it was that day to assist with a telemed session would be able to follow these instructions, log in, engage with the provider on the other end, and yes, have a telemed session.
Okay.
So when you say anybody can follow the instructions.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Stephen, a couple of questions for you. First, as David described, kind of the sequence of rolling out Office 365, is this what you would consider best practice in terms of how to roll that out to drive adoption and business value? And then the second question is regarding these telemedicine carts.
Yeah.
Could you describe, how you put together the configurations on each end so that a behavioral health professional on one end was serving the patient on the other end.
Sure. So the first question on how they rolled out Office 365. Metrocare went in both feet first, kind of thing. There was very little toe dipping in this particular pool. So they moved aggressively. I think because they wanted to get that momentum moving in the opposite direction. I think for a while the technology at Metrocare was a burden to them, and I think Dave and his team came in and their mission was to change that, to make that be an asset rather than a liability to them. So I think that their approach worked perfectly for that particular organization. They did some really smart things when they rolled out SharePoint, for example. They ran a little contest, like a selfie contest. The best selfie with Metrocare. I don't know if the Metrocare logo had to be in it, but there was some concept of doing something oriented towards it that drove them to that site where they're like, oh, I didn't even know this existed.
Yes.
I think
We've been running photo contests ever since.
No kidding.
Yeah. So the idea of a
Fascinating.
contest, I think, really drove the adoption, because it just got people willing to go out there and start to explore the new technology and get them less fearful of it.
Yep.
Yeah. So they did that. I remember their old solution for file repository. They referred to it as a graveyard. A file would go in, it would never come back out. And so, helping them architect that in a way that people could navigate their files and access them in a smart way, and high priority, high popularity documents float to the surface on some of their lists. That helped out a lot. Shifting over to telemedicine solution, we've done this a number of times. We've done it with an ICU environment. We've done it with other behavioral health specialists. We've done it with neurosurgeons. We sit down with them and just understand what their current protocols are, and we try to match that as much as possible, so that the telemedicine is not a net new experience. It's like, okay, this is what you normally do. We're going to do that 90% of the time, and here's the 10% that's different. And let's talk through what that looks like from a technology perspective. We look at their protocols, maybe add a couple of additional steps in training and what's needed to make that comfortable. But honestly, the great thing about behavioral health is that there's not a lot of complexity in here. We didn't need to add a bunch of FDA-approved devices on top of it. It's really face-to-face communication, as close as we can get to that.
Yeah.
So we rolled it out, and like we mentioned before, it was one of our best deployments, in the sense that we've had a couple of hardware issues, but besides that, we don't get calls from Metrocare asking us this or that or retrain us or anything like that. And another big point, the existing telemedicine solutions that are out there today tend to be point to point. They're very fixed. You have to go to this room to have that experience.
Right.
Putting it on the cart lets them to move that around to the patient. And on top of that, the physicians, the providers, they can be wherever they need to be. They take their Surface unit with them, and they have a telemedicine consult on the fly, and they can bring in their peers if there's a pharmacist that needs to be involved. They're already on Skype for Business, so it extends the reach of those of who can participate in those types of sessions.
Yeah. So could you describe the endpoints, like the endpoint of the patient as well as the clinician, what the configuration is, what the software, hardware, and so forth is?
Yeah, like I said, this relatively simple, straightforward solution in this case, because it's behavioral health, but it's a regular cart that you'd see in any hospital system where you'd have a laptop on it. We mount, there's a Surface unit sitting on top of it, a secondary monitor above that, so that they get a full visual experience with the provider, so they can seem like as close as we can get them into the room.
Okay.
I have a great microphone in there and good speakers, so that experience, there's not like any issues with hearing what the provider said. It's mobile, it has its own battery pack, and so we're able to wheel that in and build those relatively quickly for Metrocare.
Great.
Yeah, one of the recent event that happened was we're implementing Lean into Metrocare, and part of the Lean initiative is Gamble Walks, and so our vice president of business development happened to be visiting one of the locations where the telemed unit is. And during the line of his questions, he had actually was brought to his attention that 90% of the patients that actually had come in and had done telemedicine preferred the telemedicine.
90%.
Yes. So, and I, 90%. And I said, why? And he goes, the reliability of it. And most of us, when we go to visit a doctor, we may have a 3 p.m. appointment. We know that we're probably not going to get seen till after 3. Well, they were very, pleased with the fact that they had a 3 p.m. telemed appointment, and at 3 p.m. they were having a telemed appointment. So I know there's more to that story than just the technology, but it is interesting that they feel that passionate and strongly about the fact that they really like it.
So that kind of brings up the question, are you the only primary care practice or behavioral health practice that's doing this? And how are others approaching this that's different from what you're doing?
We're not the only ones, but I know that we're one of a few. I did get a phone call from a very, very large national insurance company that is planning on moving into Texas about several months ago and wanted to know how we were doing it, which I thought was fascinating because here we are located in Dallas County, and they want to do it. But they had heard that they'd read about our story on Microsoft's website. They'd seen it and go, okay, then these people have done it. So there's momentum building towards more people using it. Have we led the way? I think in some respects we have, and we've learned a lot throughout the process. And we're planning on expanding and growing on this and getting better on this. But yeah, I think that we were relatively not the first people, but we're close to the top.
Yeah. And I know you'd mentioned that improving the patient experience or the experience of care is a high priority digital transformation initiative for you. Mm-hmm. How has Skype for Business and telebehavioral health really changed the experience of care for our patients?
Well, I just spoke of the reliability, which is an add-on to that story. But when I was thinking about doing this first, when we were first talking about it, my fear was that how are people going to feel about sitting in front of a camera? Kind of like how I felt today. But people really took to it. In fact, almost took to it more so than they did where sitting in an office with a live human being. Mm-hmm. Having that, I don't want to call it a barrier or a shield, but that gap in between seems to work for a lot of people. So they've embraced it that way. The technology is simple for them, and they just sit there, and it's a nice flat screen, and it's a beautiful looking setup, and I think that also is somewhat cool for them. And it's as I said, it's very high tech, and that excites people. People like that. So yeah, I think that amongst other things, that's been appealing. And
so what would you say each of these units costs, and how much have you saved over a typical point solution?
Well, so we actually are able to realize our savings pretty quickly. We used to have a dedicated T1 line for each of our older telemed units at each of the locations.
Right.
So the high monthly cost of that,
$600 a month, right there. Yeah.
So we now, because of the lower bandwidth requirements, like on these particular setups, we can use the 100 meg fiber line that's running into each of our locations and use that same line without any additional circuit costs. These pay for themselves in a matter of months. And they will continue to do that the more places that we put them into. The beauty also of this solution is, yes, we're lucky enough to have these great carts, but you don't have to have the cart. You do have to be able to follow the privacy standards and make sure that you have the private room, but you can do this using a PC laptop with a screen and a camera. Mm-hmm. You have the technology ready to do it, as long as you can still access your electronic health record from the provider perspective. You can do this from anywhere.
Yeah. And Stephen, we're on the topic of privacy and security. How did you make sure that Metrocare continued to meet their privacy and security regulations, particularly HIPAA?
Sure. Yeah. So when we start talking about a telemedicine solution with a client, there's a couple different aspects to it. Obviously, if they're on Skype for Business, they've already signed a business associate agreement with Microsoft, and all the communications in transit and when it's on the Skype for Business server, all that's encrypted. So we, US Medical IT, we make ourselves accountable for the PC itself to make sure that those drives are encrypted. We've got anti-malware and all the rest to make sure that that's a secure device. And then we work with the client to find out what their protocols are, to make sure that there's proper training, to make sure that those staff are prepared to use that technology in a secure fashion. They're not putting the password underneath the keyboard or anything like that. So there's a couple of different aspects there, but that's how we usually approach it, is to make sure that we've got the solid, we're on the right platform. We've got the solid technology locked down on those the PC itself, and make sure that there's any tertiary devices that might store data. We've addressed that, and we follow good protocols to keep those surface units secure. And then we work on the protocols.
And you have a BAA as well?
Yeah, we sign BAAs with all of our clients. That's the first step before we get engaged with a client.
Right.
Yeah, and U.S. Medical worked with our compliance department to ensure that they were working along with our own compliance and regulations and governments, and that was important towards seeing success with this.
Yeah. You mentioned that this has really changed the patient experience. What about the clinician's experience? Technology has a notoriety of provoking resistance from clinicians, often complaining that it burdens them more than it empowers them, or gets in the way rather than getting out of the way. So did you see a different reaction from what we've often seen from clinicians in terms of introducing new technologies?
I mean, I think that as you said, there's always resistance to change. People don't like what they have, but they also don't want to change from what they have because it's what they're used to. And we did introduce a lot of new things all at once, and it's difficult for anybody. At first, there was absolute resistance, and people said, well, things haven't been as good since the upgrade, that old famous line in information technology. But after 6 months, people said, I couldn't do without my IM. I love SharePoint. I love the fact that our Exchange server, our mail server has never gone down. I love the reliability of it all. Has it added to their lives? Yes. It's quite obvious that they have benefited from it. Now to the point of where they will suggest that, well, can we do this now? Can we use this to do this? Especially with SharePoint. It's amazing that the employees have come up with some brilliant ideas to actually use SharePoint, to benefit their daily lives. They're coming up with this. They're using their imaginations, and I think they're pretty excited about it.
And what would the psychiatrists and psychologists say? How has it changed their lives? Any stories there?
In one particular case, we actually had one of our psychiatrists who needed to spend more time with her infant baby, and she was actually going to leave the organization. So it was brought to her attention that she could use telemed, our telemed solution, if that would work for her, to be able to actually stay and work for us, and then she could actually do some virtual visits from home. She agreed. We did some testing with her, and she's been using it ever since. We managed to retain a very important employee thanks to the technology. She wanted to stay within Metrocare. It was a great company for her, but her life outside was drawing her, but the technology was what made the difference here. Us having this telemed platform, made us retain this employee. She wrote me a very nice letter before I came out here, just to say, I still love using this, and she's still engaged. So yes.
That's awesome.
It really lifted her from having to travel around to each of these different locations.
Yeah.
I think that was the burden that she had, that she was carrying. That it didn't. Once the telemedicine solution was in there, it allowed her to stay in a single location, whether that's in her home or in her office, and that cut back on the amount of time needed.
Yeah.
Allowed for her to stay in the workplace. And
yeah.
So each of these psychiatrists would rotate from clinic to clinic, and so if now you have the clinician in one place and patients can be seen at any one of those locations, I would think that the continuity would improve for patients.
Absolutely, because also the clinician is not being forced to always have to get into their car to try to make appointments, and then sometimes they can't, and then somebody else has to step in. So you're absolutely right. The continuity, we're able to maintain that using the technology.
Right. So Stephen, if a company like Metrocare came to you asking for a telemedicine solution, what advice would you offer based on your experience? You've deployed a lot of telemedicine solutions in clinics.
Yeah.
what would your advice be to them?
We usually start the conversation talking around the logistics, like what is the actual scenario you're trying to light up in this particular scenario? What's the specialty that we're dealing with? Is it behavioral health? Is it a cardiologist? What equipment's required? Also, do we have good internet in both of these different locations that we can count on for these encounters? Because once you start to rely on telemedicine, and if it fails, if something happens in the communication, then that causes a lot of stress on everyone, because you begin to count on that as a reliable communication mechanism. So once we've worked through all the logistical details, we try to, like I said before, match as close as we can to their existing experience. Like, just imagine, instead of it being you walking in the room, the cart walks in, somebody walks the cart in, what do you do usually? Well, let's talk through what those steps are and what your protocols are, and let's see how closely we can match that without changing anything. And then obviously, like I said, there's usually 10% that need to be adjusted, and we make those adjustments to fit the particular scenario.
Yeah. And Dave, any advice that you would have to your peers, particularly around customers that might be reluctant to offer Office 365 or thinking about a telemedicine solution? Even a couple of weeks ago, I was talking with a large enterprise that was expressing concern that they didn't want to overwhelm their clinicians with Office 365 because there's just so much in it.
Yeah.
What advice would you offer them?
That's very true. So we don't overwhelm everybody with all of the things that are in it. There are 39 agencies just like ours in the state of Texas, and we have quarterly information consortium meetings. 2.5 years ago, nobody was running Office 365 except for us. People thought we were crazy. Now the state of Texas has Office 365, and so do half of the agencies. So what was crazy 3 years ago is not crazy any longer. The advice I would have is, be bold. Don't just keep on doing the same old just because you know how that's going to end up. Find yourself a good partner that you can work with that fills in the gaps of your knowledge, because we all have those, and embrace the technology. And because you're going to empower your users to have a much, better situation and be able to provide much better service to whatever types of customers they have, whether they be patients or any type of customers.
Great. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today and sharing your stories and your insights. We really appreciate it. I look forward to our next conversation.
All right.
Thanks, Dennis.
Thank you.